Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex Podcast, the NFL edition. It is week 4. We had a very interesting week 3, to say the least. So we'll get into that and then do our regular show. I'm joined, as always, by fellow Labs guys Matthew Freedman and Peter Jennings, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88. And this week, joined by special guest, although she is a friend of the pod, has been on a couple times throughout some of our older pods as well. Renee Miller, she's a neuroscientist, DFS writer just in a lot of places. I won't list them all, but author of a book, Cognitive Bias in Fantasy Sports, and really specializes in that really interesting part of like sort of the psychoanalytics of DFS and how we think. So Renee, always glad to have you on. How you doing?
Great. It's good to be back.
Cool. Yeah. So I definitely want to touch on some of that stuff. And I know that we sort of talk about this every time you come on. So sorry, I guess when you're an expert, you just have to talk about things all the time, the same things all the time. But I do want to hop into that just a little bit. So you've talked for years about these cognitive biases that we have and how they relate to DFS, like recency bias and some other ones. And I'm curious, you've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years. I'm curious, do you think the public is getting better in this regard, or is this something that the public's always going to be prone to?
Yeah, it's been longer than that even. And I think the answer to both of those questions is yes. Yes, the public is more and more informed, but the nature of cognitive bias is that it's always going to be something that we struggle with, all of us. And being aware of it helps most of the time, some of the time at least, but we're gonna cave into it more often than we probably should.
Yeah, that's very fair. So to just put you on the spot a little bit, I'm curious to just, throughout the first 3 weeks of the NFL season, what are some examples of biases that you've seen in like lessons that you've taken from them that maybe we can apply to week 4 and just and beyond that even?
Well, I think the beginning of the season is the worst, arguably. There's a lot of anticipation built up, which sort of primes the brain to give in to the cognitive bias, or like it just really primes the pump for the cognitive bias to take over. So all that emotion and anticipation and hope and everything really conspires, and the stuff that happens early in the season tends to stay with us, and we overvalue it for the rest of the weeks. These early events, we form our impressions of players and they stick with us going forward, despite, evidence that might contradict that initial impression. It takes a lot to overcome our first impressions. So that's an example of primacy bias. And then, you mentioned recency bias. In the first couple weeks of the season, we get both, right? We get the primacy bias and the recency bias because the most recent thing that happened is also the first thing that happened in the season. So we're dealing with that. This year, I also wrote a piece on novelty bias, which I haven't gone into too much before as it relates to fantasy. But this is the idea that people, and not just people, actually, in my neuroscience world, I do research on this microscopic nematode, the soil nematode. Nematodes have novelty bias, which means that they will react and prefer something new that they haven't seen before over something familiar. And you can apply it to with rodents and monkeys and worms and everything, with food, with mates, with toys, with fantasy football players, right? So I think at the beginning of the season, we get enamored with new situation, players on new teams. We get enamored with rookies. We have the, part of it is that those people haven't let us down before, or the new context provides some sort of, we justify some sort of boost in the new context that sometimes is valid and deserving. Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt, yeah, he was the guy that stood out to me when you were talking about that.
Yeah. Fournette looks strong so far, but it's not going to be the case for everybody. Deshaun Kaiser, I think, has a lot of promise in the league, but has struggled a little bit with turnovers, for example. So I think all those things together at the beginning of the season are like the cognitive biases are just bubbling over.
Pete, you're one of the OGs of DFS. You've been playing for years and years and years. Is this something that I assume that you've just been working on all this stuff for your entire DFS career?
Trying to. I've been fortunate to learn a lot from Renee. It's good to be back with Renee. We had a fun time this spring doing a panel for the Sloan Sports Conference, and she always has great insights. And it's a big challenge. I mean, football, you have all week to think about. You have the recency bias, which is more impactful than other sports just because the other sports are every single day. And people still make those choices. But, NFL in particular, I think, there's the reruns of all the highlights and, especially early in the season, this is the only data we really have for this year, obviously, and people tend to really overvalue that. So something I am definitely not perfect at. Hopefully I've gotten a little bit better, but I'm hoping for some good regression kind of as we get further into the NFL season, because I have not been very right so far in the beginning of the season.
So let's use our skills to identify these biases, whether they are, whether we're doing that in a positive or negative way. We're going to play our real fake segment. And Freedman, just because we haven't heard from you yet, hope you're doing well. Let's start with you. Let's go through a real trend that will continue and a fake one, and maybe we can interplay some of our bias talk as well in here.
All right. Well, first, I just want to say hey to Renee. It's awesome to have her on the show. I remember her from the RotoViz days where she was cranking out some awesome cognitive content there. So it's always great having her on the pod. I'm going to say something that's real is sort of like and this is more real/Vegas-y versus DFS, but I think it has DFS implications. I think the Patriots' trend of 3 straight games hitting the over, I think that's real. Obviously, with Brady, you have a perennial top 5 offense. But one thing that's really troubling right now with that team is that their defense is just hemorrhaging yards and points. They're last in the league in both of those categories to opposing offenses. And at some point that will correct. You have to think that they will improve given that they have, the sort of like defensive genius of Bill Belichick there. But I think through scheme, they can still only do so much to cover up the personnel shortcomings that they have. They're missing their middle linebacker, so that really hurts them in run defense. They can't get great pressure on the quarterback. Their secondary hasn't really coalesced into like a solid unit yet. So I think opposing offenses are going to continue to get in shootouts with the Patriots. So I think that could have some DFS goodness, but in just terms of like Vegas, the over is something that I'm going to be looking at a lot. And then I'll just say something fake. Melvin Gordon as a good player, I think that's fake. I don't think he's a good player. And I know there's a difference between like real life and fantasy. And so for fantasy, he's great in that he gets the goal line work. He gets receptions. He's, like a big-bodied guy who gets lots of touches, and that's good. But I think at some point his real-life inefficiency is going to catch up to his fantasy viability, and he will be less viable moving forward.
You're pounding this Melvin Gordon hate here last couple weeks.
Well, if you just keep saying the same thing over and over, at some point it might be true.
Right. Renee, what are some things that you think might be real, might be fake starting off the year?
I haven't given too much thought to what might be fake, but one thing that I think might be real is that the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is finally what they have wanted it to be, and they've tried to build through the draft now for a few years, and it looks like it's finally coming together. They're the only team in the league right now that is leading in the main categories that give fantasy points: sacks, interceptions, and fumble recoveries. They're top 3, top 1 or top 2 in every one of those categories. And I think this is designed. I think this is what the team wanted. I think they built for this. And I think it's something that we can see continue. I don't think it really translates much for their offense in any meaningful way. But I do think it's not going to be that mentality that we've had for so long that you see the Jaguars on the schedule and it's an automatic target against.
One thing just to add on to what Renee said, and they also, I mean, as she said, right, they did it through the draft, but then they also brought in a few key free agents to supplement what they had there and really boost everything. And I think that there could be the potential for implications with the offense. If the defense is good and able to hold teams, they're going to run the ball. I think they're going to try to, impersonate last year's Cowboys team and run the ball with Fournette. And so a lot of that is dependent on the defense being able to keep the game close. And if the defense can do it, that makes Fournette a lot more enticing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do know the positive correlation between a running back and his own defense. So definitely a good point there. Pete, what's something real, something fake that you've noticed from last week or just this whole season?
So I was going to talk about the Jaguars as well. I think something that's real is they probably do play better in England now in London than they do in Jacksonville. That might be a bigger home field advantage for them. They're used to it, and there's probably something there. I mean, they've gone out the most, I think, of any team, and I'm a big believer in their defense. I've talked about that, and that's the one thing I feel like I've gotten pretty right so far. Obviously, they had a really disappointing week 2, but I do like this Jaguars defense. In terms of fake, I mean, Matt, it's already hit on it. I mean, if we're going to continue to talk about something and just keep banging that drum, I guess I'm going to talk about Amari Cooper. 2 parts of this, real and fake. Real, this drop thing might be for real. I mean, at this point in time, he had a ton of drops his first year, a ton of drops his second year, and he has the worst catch rate so far this season, and that certainly is very concerning. Obviously, I've been really wrong. It's been very expensive being long Amari Cooper and having him in DFS. It's been awful for my prop bets as well. But, that's one thing I am a little concerned about. But definitely what's fake to me is everyone writing him off as, oh, he's not a good receiver. He's not a guy who's going to be valuable down the road. The guy just turned 23 this summer. He's a first-round pick who a ton of people think is a total star. If you watch just the tape of his movement and his athletic ability, there's no doubt in my mind that he still could be a star. I love the situation with Derek Carr, having another good receiver like Crabtree, but this is the week where I definitely will have 0 Amari Cooper and won't be making any props outside of my Crabtree Cooper thing. But if he goes off in Denver, it's going to be an all-time tilt fest for me. So hope that answers everything. I definitely am concerned. I think the drop thing could be real, but I do think it's fake that he's just done at this point and not a valuable receiver going forward.
Pete, you've already booked me at Freedman at plus a point every
all year. I'll do it all year.
Yeah.
Are we sure it wasn't plus 1.5? 1.5 sounds much more reasonable.
You have to play it back. I think we might have agreed to different lines or something. I don't
know. No. 1.5 was how many fantasy points he scored last week, Freedman. That's what.
Ouch.
He scored less than that actually on certain sites, but
yeah.
He scored 1.6 on DraftKings.
Pete, at least you're a good sport about all this. Freeman, before we just get to off this point, you had written about the London games and about Bortles. I think it was Bill Simmons and his cousin Sal. They said that we should call him Sir Blake Bortles from now on, just because of his dominance in London.
Yeah, he's I think 3-1 in London, and then for the rest of his career, it's like maybe 11-34 or something like that. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Okay. Good trends here. Let's move on and talk about some of the chalk. This is the first segment that we get into our show here. So when we're making lineups this week, who are some of the first players that are enticing to lock in, some of the chalky plays that we're identifying? And again, this is early in the week. We record this on Tuesday night, so things can change as we get some better ideas on injuries and stuff like that. But just from a pricing standpoint, matchups, who are some potential people that might be chalky, you think, in week 4? Renee, I'll kick to you first on this one.
I think some of the pricing inefficiencies this week, Fournette, we already mentioned. I think he's a little underpriced this week and in a good spot. I think AJ Green and Andy Dalton are reasonably popular, fairly priced, little mini stack this week in Cleveland. Chris Carson, Chris Thompson, I think will both probably be pretty popular running back plays. I'm tending to spend a little bit more. I like Fournette, I like Gurley, I like Elliott. In terms of, and maybe you can tell from this line of answering that this feels like a week to me where I'm starting at running back and I'm, a lot of weeks I might start at quarterback or rarely somewhere else. But this week feels like I really want to get running back right and go from there.
Yeah, last week was a particularly tough week when it came to identifying some chalk, and it seems like this week just the pricing is still pretty sharp. And it's going to be difficult to find the chalk, and that's good to know. I think that should be part of the conversation, is that these guys might be more chalky than others, but overall we may not have a guy that's like 40% owned. Freedman, who are some guys that you think might be chalky this week?
Well, just kind of picking up of what you said there, it's a difficult situation in that it is not a bye week yet, but it feels like the bye weeks because you have the Bears and the Packers, so no Aaron Rodgers playing on Thursday. You have Drew Brees playing in London, so he's not on the main slate. On DK, they don't have the Sunday night game, so no Russell Wilson. And then on Monday night, you don't have Kirk Cousins. So it's automatically the top 10 that you normally have in quarterbacks is thinned out. So I think it is harder this week to start at the quarterback position. And so with that said, at quarterback, I'm fine going down all the way to Tyrod Taylor as sort of like the de facto high floor. He can do it with his legs, plug them in type of cash game quarterback. And one thing also I like about that is that the Bills and Falcons game right now on the main slate has the slate high total with 48.5 points. So the Falcons last year were top 3 in the league in points allowed to quarterbacks. So I'm fine this week paying down at quarterback and going with Tyrod. And then at running back, Renee talked a little bit about Fournette and Gurley and Zeke. I'm interested in Zeke and Gurley in the Rams and Cowboys matchup. Obviously, I wouldn't put both of them in the same cash game lineup, but individually, they're interesting. Both the Rams and the Cowboys have been exploitable by running backs this year, especially the Rams. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the position. So I would be interested in looking at Gurley. And then I'll be curious to hear what Pete and Renee have to say, but I'm interested in Odell Beckham. And some people, they don't like him, and that's fine. But he looks healthy. He was running around well. He played more snaps. And then the Buccaneers are really exploitable, at least to this point in the season. In week 2, they gave up a lot of production to a very thin Bears wide receiver unit. And then in week 3, they were destroyed by Diggs and Thielen with Case Keenum throwing the ball. So they're allowing the most fantasy points so far to wide receivers. So I'm interested in Odell Beckham. I don't feel great about him being more expensive than Julio, but I don't know. I think he's a guy who's interesting. And then tight end, sort of undecided. It's maybe Cameron Brate, but I wish he were cheaper and getting more targets.
Pete, who are some chalk plays that you're thinking? Maybe you agree or disagree with Matt and Renee.
No, I think they're hitting on a lot of good points here. One guy that, speaking of tilting, Larry Fitzgerald was chalk week 1 and 2, had a ton of exposure to him. And I did get him in the late slates 100%, but did not make up for the pounding that he gave us in weeks 1 and 2. After that performance in this matchup, I expect Larry Fitzgerald to be very heavily owned and to be a chalk play going forward in these good matchups. I think running back's interesting. Someone who would have been chalk outside of just basically last week would be C.J. Anderson going against Oakland here at a reasonable price tag, but only 8 carries makes me a little nervous. I think the Patriots and Falcons guys will be interesting. Obviously, the Patriots are a little harder to nail, but Gronkowski definitely seems like someone you might pay up for going forward. I think Freeman makes a lot of sense for Atlanta. Let's talk Julio now. You mentioned Beckham. Julio's having the same problem he's had recently, especially last year, a lack of red zone targets. Is he someone that you guys think will be somewhat popular, or is the tight cap and the lack of red zone targets a challenge for him?
I think one thing that so Julio, as you mentioned, he looks very much like the same guy from last year. He's a yardage accumulator, as you mentioned, not getting the red zone targets. One problem is he's not getting as many targets in general as he had last year. And then the Bills have actually looked pretty good this year in the secondary, which is kind of surprising considering that they're starting like 5 new guys back there in the secondary. But they've been able to pull it together. But right now, I think the Bills are in the top 4 in pass DVOA, which the season is still young, but they've looked pretty cohesive as a unit. So I don't know. Julio, I mean, he has so much upside, but it just seems like he's not getting the targets just in volume or in leverage that you want out of a guy you're going to have to pay up for.
I think
right.
I think something you have to be careful about this time of year, and I mean, I do it too. Anybody that looks at defensive numbers, matchups, rankings against position, any of that, is to look at the opponents. And so while Buffalo's very young, inexperienced secondary hasn't allowed a touchdown yet, I think Julio gets it. I know we're not doing prop bets, but I'll take that one. Yeah, that Julio gets a touchdown this week against Buffalo.
I like it.
I mean, Cam Newton looked terrible in that second game.
He's looked terrible in every game, to be fair.
He has. I think the Bills allow a touchdown to a wide receiver this week, and that it's Julio that gets it.
Okay.
I like it. One other guy too. I mean, we'll get into pivots though, but like that, if we're talking about Atlanta, Tevin Coleman's getting some decent involvement, especially in the passing game. He's a significant discount. And then someone else, the last guy I meant to bring up right off the bat, who I don't know if he'll be chalk, but he definitely should be, is Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has been just absolutely getting a ton of volume, still priced in kind of this mid-tier. And last week I was really encouraged, 5 targets and then 27 rushing attempts. If you're looking for volume, he's another guy, which I think makes a lot of sense. It definitely feels like a 3 running back week on DraftKings.
Yeah, Dalvin clearly the 3 down back there. Pete, so I'm curious, and we'll use this to pivot into some of our pivot plays. Sort of looking at matchups and guys, I thought LaShawn McCoy might be fairly chalky, and no one had mentioned him. He struggled the last 2 weeks, in tough matchups against the Panthers and the Broncos. But this is a guy who owns 65% of Buffalo's rushing attempts, and he's also the leading receiver for their team as well. He has, 26% of Buffalo's targets. He's been getting, 6 to 8 targets per game. So even as a dog here in this situation, we know how bad Atlanta has been to running backs in general, and especially ones that can catch balls out of the backfield. I guess the question is, if Tyrod becomes sort of chalky at quarterback, do you think that is going to lower LaShawn's ownership just because of like the negative correlation that people were worried about? What are your thoughts on LaShawn? I'm just sort of surprised that people hadn't brought him up.
I mean, the problem is his price, right? I mean, he's 100 less than Kareem Hunt, who people are just going to click on way more. Le'Veon Bell's only, 300 more. Le'Veon is interesting this week as well, but going on the road here against Baltimore is a bit concerning. I think people saw a lot from Zeke as well, so I think that people will kind of go up to him too. I actually think he's a pretty good pivot in tournaments, especially if you want to stack up that game. I think that makes sense. He certainly has shown the involvement in the passing game. Some pivots for me, I mean, if you start looking at the wide receiver position, A.J. Green was really chalky last week with that spot. I think he's not going to be chalky at all. I think Beckham and Jones are going to soak up all that ownership. Going against Cleveland, I don't mind looking at A.J. Green as a little bit of a pivot as well in the expensive range. I like this Miami-New Orleans game too. That's another one that I think that's not on the main slate, I don't believe, but that's another game that's really interesting for me. At the quarterback position, this is the one thing. Do you guys think that people are going to be playing Brady and Matt Ryan a ton, or do you think that we're going to see people dip down into the lower tier range? Because that's, kind of a nice way to start thinking about gaining leverage is what quarterback, obviously the ownership spread out a decent bit, but what quarterback is going to be really overlooked this week, and where can you get some leverage there? So to me, there's some guys that stand out right away. I think Dak Prescott looked pretty impressive. I wonder if people will be on him, but I like Dak Prescott to Des Bryant quite a bit this week. There's another kind of pivot that I'm looking at. Renee, what do you think for pivots this week?
I think one pivot is playing the full slate versus the main slate, because a lot of the good games that we're talking about.
Right, yeah.
So maybe, I know for me personally, I'm doing a lot more Thursday, Monday than I usually do. Usually I'm heavier on Sunday, full day Sunday. But and just because I want the opportunity to use some of the, New Orleans, Kansas City guys in particular. Some pivots, I think we just talked about how terrible Cam Newton is, but we also talked about how susceptible the Patriots defense has been. This will hinge a lot on whether Kelvin Benjamin practices and plays this week, but I think Cam Newton's going to be very low owned with a high total, playing from behind in all likelihood. And certainly, I mean, we know him, he can be very, very effective. I mean, no one would be shocked if he had a 5-touchdown game. Other pivots, I think there's a couple cases, Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans come to mind, where I don't want to really deal with that cornerback matchup, and I might just pivot to Travis Kelce or Cameron Brate. Somebody mentioned Brate already, but his price is still really reasonable on FanDuel. So that's something I'm looking at to avoid those shutdown corner Jenkins and Josh Norman.
Yeah, Jenkins, yeah, definitely, for sure. Look better in week 3. Freedman, what are your thoughts on some pivots?
Yeah, so I like Renee's answer about pivoting from the main slate to the larger 16-game slate.
So much better.
Yeah, and thinking about this slate and Pete's question of what is the ownership for Brady and Ryan going to look like going against the Panthers and the Bills, I think it's possible that they could, and I would trust your opinion on this so much more than mine, but I think it's possible that some of the ownership that otherwise would have gone to someone like Rodgers or Breeze, that they will soak up a chunk of that ownership and maybe as a result be a little more inflated than they normally would be. But I'm fine with, and Renee said pivoting down to Newton. I like that. I also don't mind Carson Palmer as a decent pivot play. He's second in volume in terms of pass attempts on the season and third in terms of passing yards. And so the Cardinals, without David Johnson, they've been in more of a pass-heavy game script. So I think he's someone who's possible. And then, I don't know if I like saying this, and I have no idea what Pete's going to think. I don't mind pivoting to Amari Cooper. I know that's like the crazy spot to do it on the road against the Broncos, but and given the performance that he's had in the past 2 weeks when he's just been horrible to Pete's bankroll, it's a situation where if we look at week 2, Des Bryant's ownership in Denver in a similar situation, it was around 1%. I think Cooper is going to be maybe closer to 0% than to 1% this week, given what he's done recently. And I think anytime you have a chance to take someone like him at ownership that low, I don't know. I think it's a decent spot to do it. And then I also don't mind Golden Tate on the road against Minnesota. I think because of that matchup, he might have depressed ownership. But the Vikings have been exploitable, specifically in the shorter area of the field. And so I think that can play to Golden Tate's strengths.
Man, Cooper, I don't know. I mean, obviously, if I'm running out some Simeon stacks, which I want to, I'm going to have to run it back with someone. I literally never play anyone versus Denver, and it's – I mean, the Zeke call week 2 I feel stupid about, but especially receivers. I mean, it's just as brutal of a matchup as you can possibly get.
Oh, definitely.
But he seems to go off in these weird spots.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Even in that brutal matchup that Des Bryant had, he still had, I think, like 16 fantasy points, which isn't, like, amazing. But at less than 1% ownership, that's pretty good. It's not inconceivable to think that all it takes is one busted play and then a couple more receptions after that, and Amari could have 20 points at 1% ownership.
Yeah, as painful as it was, I'm sure for you, Pete, to see Amari only go for like 1 fantasy point last week. I feel like the worst possible scenario for you is that he goes for 40 DK points and you're not on him, right?
I'm already anticipating such events, but.
I mean, you have to hedge, like worst case scenario, Amari goes off.
Gosh, it's just been so brutal. That Washington matchup, I mean, it couldn't have gone worse. Yeah. Like how, like the first play, like that they actually throw downfield, it's Cooper. And I'm like, yes, this is going to be awesome. And then interception and the Raiders just totally, I mean, a lot of that was, I mean, Cooper wasn't getting open, had some drops, but Derek Carr looked abysmal. I mean, that was bad. Now you go into Denver and you expect them to bounce back. But, yeah, if you get them under 1%, I think it makes sense.
Okay, let's move on here. Our next segment is going to be talking about stacks. We're going to start with some conventional stacks, and then we'll move to advanced contrarian ones as well. Pete, I'm going to kick it right back to you on this one. What are some of the conventional stacks that you're considering for this week?
We talked about it already. I mean, I think Matt Ryan to Julio makes a lot of sense this week. I know the red zone targets people will talk about, and I get the concern, but Buffalo traded its corners. You're looking at a really high team total, especially on the main slate. I love them in this spot. An eruption spot at some point is going to come for Julio. He can take any play for a touchdown. So I think at some point he's definitely going to make a lot of sense. The other one that I really like is Brady to Gronk. As long as Gronk's healthy, it's the Gronk that we've seen, the last couple of years, not last year, but the years before. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns and certainly has big play upside. So those are two kind of conventional high-end stacks I think make a lot of sense. But the concern, I guess, is going to be ownership.
Mm-hmm. Renee, what are some of the conventional stacks that you're looking at in week 4?
Yeah, same. If you are expanding, obviously getting some Drew Brees, New Orleans stack. We didn't talk about Willie Snead being back. He's certainly not one of my top options, but I think will probably be pretty popular play. Everyone's been, fed up with Tedkin through the first couple of weeks.
Novelty bias, right?
Yeah, not a pipe. So novelty bias again with Willie Snead. Michael Thomas though finally had looked good in week 3. Clearly the multi-headed running back disasters. They need to get back to the heavy passing game. So I like a Saints stack. Patriots. I don't know. Buffalo we talked about a little bit. I think I think I like Tyrod, McCoy, Charles Clay stack.
Yeah. I sort of don't mind the negative correlation just because of Shea's involvement in the passing game as well. Freedman, Tybo on the sports.
Yeah, so for the normal stacks, the conventional stacks, basically the ones that they just mentioned. I mean, and I guess if we wanted to also expand a little bit and think about the Thursday night game, Rodgers going to any of those players, I'll be interested to know what's going on with Cobb and the chest injury, although it looks like he was practicing and is likely to be back this week. I mean, I think Brady to Gronk and Matt Ryan to Julio, I think those are like the standard conventional stacks, and I'm totally fine with those.
Pete, do you think like Palmer Fitz will be a combination, or people just Fitz by himself?
I think Fitz by himself will be more popular, but certainly Palmer, I mean, he had a pretty nice game.
He's been better after, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue is Palmer's just getting destroyed. That offensive line's terrible, but yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, let's talk about some contrarian stacks. And this could be a negative correlation one, or it could be just low-owned players, a low-owned team. I'm not exactly sure. However way you want to take this, however direction is fine. Renee, I'll kick to you first on this one.
I think either side of one game that I don't think we've mentioned at all, the Tennessee-Houston game, could make for low ownership, high upside stacks. Deshaun Watson maybe a little bit more on people's radar coming off the big 300-yard, 3-touchdown game. But really since he started starting, he's been good. And DeAndre Hopkins with him is a little mini stack I like. But on the other side, I think after week 1, Mariota was, I think, the biggest hyped quarterback for season long coming into the season and maybe in week 1. And then the enthusiasm or interest or chatter about him has really gone downhill. So I think he's in a good spot this week. I like both sides of that game and think they're going to be a little bit overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a brutal matchup. They played the Jags and the Seahawks. I mean, yeah, it's terrible. Freedman, what are some pivot stacks or maybe just some unconventional ones?
Yeah, so I love that call with Deshaun and Hopkins. That's the one I was going to go with, especially if it looks like Will Fuller is starting to be eased back into action. And so potentially that could lighten some of the defensive pressure on Hopkins. Watson, he's looked pretty decent in terms of like progression from his first start to his second start, and maybe that was just a byproduct of playing the Patriots. But the Titans, they weren't all that great in pass defense last year. They haven't been so far this year. So I think it's a pretty positive spot for him, especially his first start at home this year. So I think that's another positive thing he has going for him. I like Cam Newton to Christian McCaffrey on the other side of the Patriots game. The Pats historically aren't all that great in pass defense against running backs. And again, with Greg Olsen being out, I think they were starting to look in the short passing game a little bit more for the running back. So that's one that's interesting. And Pete kind of hit on this already, but I like the Trevor Siemian to either one of his wide receivers and then running it back with either one of those Oakland wide receivers.
Oh, yeah.
Back at home.
That's my pivot.
Yeah.
Simeon's a great price. You look at Sanders coming off 15 targets last week. Obviously, game flow is really helpful. Demaryius Thomas almost got that 100 yards, just missed it. I mean, both those guys are going to be heavily involved. We watched Kirk Cousins just shred the Oakland defense. Now, they're traveling back to Denver. I think this is a great spot for Siemian. He has great splits early in the year. And I just think Siemian looks good. I mean, I know didn't play well in the Ralph relatively, but that's a really tough spot in a sandwich game coming off a great game where they win in Dallas and he played good, knowing they have Oakland at home. Just a sandwich spot in the Ralph where, it's pretty reasonable for him not to have a good game. So I'm on that. The big concern is running it back with one of those guys, but I guess I'll light some more money on fire with Amari Cooper. The good news with you guys when I light money on fire with Amari Cooper is at least we're getting Coors Light so I can drown my sorrow.
That's right. Yeah, Siemian, he has pretty good home road splits over the last year as well. So being back at home against Oakland, maybe you could run it back. Denver has been fairly susceptible to the tight end just in the middle of the field. So maybe roll it back with Cook. All right, cool. Well, let's finish up with our bold calls, and then we'll get to the skill game props. Freedman, you gave us a very lame bold call last week, and then we forced you into actually becoming more bold by calling the Chicago Bears upset, and then it came through. So I don't know if you should be proud of that or thank us or whatever, but let's see if you can do it twice in a row.
I was just trying to be reasonable, and you guys pushed me to be an extreme, which I guess it turned out. So the Bills are 8-point underdogs on the road against the Falcons. I've learned that it's not bold to say they'll keep it close. So I guess I'll just go all the way and say that the Bills are going to win outright. One thing that I think they have going in their favor is that Bills head coach Sean McDermott. I think he has a scrappy team, but more importantly, he has firsthand knowledge of the NFC South. And so he's familiar with the Falcons. And so I think he can game plan for them a little more concretely than if he's just a new head coach facing a new team that he has no familiarity with. So I think that's one small thing that he has going in his favor that people might overlook. And then in terms of DFS, I'm going to go with DeAndre Hopkins getting 100 yards and a touchdown for the reasons we've already discussed. I think it's a great spot for him.
Pete, be bold for me.
Like the calls there. Got two real-life bold calls. I'm going to say Denver wins by 2 touchdowns, and then I'll say Miami after an awful, abysmal game. I think they get back on track here at home. I liked some of the stuff I saw from the defense. Obviously, New Orleans looked impressive, but I'll say the Dolphins win this game here. Obviously, a weird situation with where they're at. But I think the Dolphins get back on track, and Jay Cutler hopefully has a good game out there. But my DFS bold call, I'm going to go ham on Trevor Siemian and say Siemian is the number 1 fantasy scoring quarterback this week. And DT and Emmanuel Sanders, one of those guys, is the top receiver.
I like it. Correlated calls. And,
Pete, Freedman wants to get in something.
That's 2 weeks in a row that you've picked the home team in the London game.
I know the home team with the Miami here. Obviously, it's in London, but I get it.
He was on Sir Blake Bortles, so I mean, yeah, you got to.
They're technically the home team in this spot.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, can't argue with that.
They're obviously not at home, but does Miami matter at all?
No. I'm just glad that New Orleans didn't have to lose a home game to play in London, because that really would have been the worst.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, especially for fantasy purposes, we need that the Superdome games for sure. Renee, you feeling bold?
I don't know. Not usually. I guess my bold real football call is that Seattle shuts out the Colts. 0 points for Brissett. Coming off the stellar T.Y. Hilton game.
I like it.
Seattle's back at home. I think defense dominates and shut out. Cool. For bold DFS call, I'm going to go with Travis Kelce being the top tight end Monday night of the week. Washington, I think because they've been okay, Josh Norman has been so effective at limiting wide receivers. Quarterbacks aren't throwing in his direction at all. It's funneled a lot of action to tight ends. So we've seen Zach Ertz and Jared Cook last week, and Everett, the rookie from the Rams, even had a huge game against them. So I'll say Kelce is the number one tight end this week.
I like that.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get to our skill game propositions part of the podcast. Everyone's favorite part of the podcast. Time to put some 6-packs of Coors Light into play. We're going to offer up some skill game propositions. But because I was the donkey last week and forgot my page of our records, I made sure that I have it in front of me right now. So let me update you real quick on how we're doing, and then we'll hop into giving some skill game props for this week. So year to date, Peter is 30 and 45. And I think most of the 45 have been because of Amari Cooper, if I'm being honest.
It's got to be at least 20 of them. And, yeah, I deserve it, especially when I'm picking the fucking home team in London.
I got to say, it was week 2 for Pete, because he started off week 1 hot. That week 2 was brutal.
I went all in on Cooper.
Yeah, week 2, gosh, I have it here. Yeah, week 2, Peter was 6 and 21.
Solid.
That hurts.
500 outside of week 2, but man, that week 2.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, you're right. Freeman is 31 and 34, so almost 500, and which is sort of impressive because he lost like 12 straight bets betting against Isaiah Crowell. So you really didn't hedge yourself on that.
Horrible. Yeah, I was leveraged there, and then also on JJ Nelson. And right. That was before before we got news of the hamstring injury in the middle of the week. So I feel like I got shafted just a smidgen on that. But that's what happens when you are over leveraged on some players. So my mistake there.
I will say my favorite prop, going back and looking at these of last week, was that you had JJ Nelson. You got 2.5 points against Cooper. Against Cooper. And JJ Nelson didn't score a single point and won the bet.
That is amazing.
Over Cooper.
Pete's the best.
Pete's just not even paying attention to us anymore in this Cooper slander. It's probably why.
I deserve it.
And then the guests are 30 and 25. So Renee has got a nice little win streak heading into this week. And on that note, I guess let's hop right into it.
No, we're not stopping there. So I'm not very good at math, obviously, which is why I'm not above 500. But it seems that you have a nice, tidy little lead in all of this with, I should say, not quite as much volume as the rest of us.
You learned from the best, like you, Freedman, hosting last year. You just sit back and wait until everyone's like, oh, yeah, I agree.
I got to say, I was playing the Carson Palmer role, all right? I was basically playing dead for the first half of the season, and then the second half of the season, I was right up there with everyone else.
Yeah, that's true. I'm 27 and 12, which I did not want to say publicly because then you guys are going to give me all sort of sharp lines that I don't want. I want the donkey lines that you guys have thrown out. But,
yeah.
Maybe a little late on that. All right, let's hop into it. Let's throw out some props. I won't kick it to anyone in particular. If you guys want to get some early action, someone take the lead here.
All right, Cooper and Crabtree. Everyone's locking that in, right? You guys.
Yeah, I mean that's already on the table. You have Cooper. We have Crabtree plus a point.
Yeah. The question is whether Renee wants some action on this.
Yeah, I mean Renee, if you want to negotiate a better line there, feel free.
No, I'm good. I'm out on Crabtree.
Yeah, this is our battle to fight.
Not this week. Yeah.
Okay,
that's fair.
I'm fighting from the grave, but I'm trying to get out.
Well, let's revisit. So Renee mentioned a touchdown for Julio. I'll take that.
Okay. You want to set it out?
I will go with Renee on that. I say Julio scores a touchdown this week.
So we're putting it at 0.5?
Yeah, over under. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just
0.5. Renee and Pete have the over. Freedman has the under.
Yeah, taking on both of y'all.
I'm going to take the over as well, Matt. So you're against all of us.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. If the line on Julio is 0.5 touchdowns, yeah, I'm going to take it.
He does have a little bit of a back injury. I feel like I've been taking a lot of injured players lately too, but hopefully he should be fine.
He should be fine.
Okay, I want the let me see right now what the over is on the Patriots game, but I want the over if anyone is fine taking the under. It's 48 right now that we have on the site. So if anyone wants the under, Renee, where do you think that line should be?
I was surprised it didn't come in around 55.
Really? Given how bad the
action there, buddy.
So Brady's thrown for 8 touchdowns. They've rushed for a couple. The defense has allowed 8 touchdowns. I mean, those are both that 8
right.
High water mark on both sides of the ball.
Sure. What about because the Panthers on the other side have been
the juice is on the over, by the way. So the real line's probably like 48.5.
Yeah. So given how bad the Panthers have been, like kind of in relation to the over under, let's see. So
I'll take under 50 if you want it, bud.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you do 50?
Yeah, I'll take on 50 is a win for you. I'll be generous.
Yeah, I think you're framing it a little bit. Anyway, I'll go over 50. Pete will go under 50.
And I think we'll see the line close around 49.5 or 50. I mean, I think people will start to realize this. The other thing, too, about the Panthers, Christian McCaffrey was very involved in the passing game last week. Yeah. They're going to try to throw more. I mean, especially if this turns out to be a game flow where the Patriots get out to an early lead. The disaster scenario is just Carolina getting out to an early lead and just running the ball. I mean, that's really the only thing you're fading with that over.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Brady's not going to let that happen.
Yeah. So, all right, so Renee's on the over there. Bryan, are you over or under or staying out?
I'm out.
Of course. Of course.
I love that Freedman's giving him crap now.
Yeah. Pop me kettle, right? I'll throw out a line. I'm not really sure how to do this. I'll take LaShawn McCoy against any other running back.
Okay. Let me look here.
I will take Le'Veon Bell.
Okay.
I'll take Elliott.
Pete, so we went almost the whole pod without even talking about Le'Veon Bell. So you just took him. What are your thoughts on him on the road against the Ravens there? I mean,
I'm nervous. It's not a great spot, but just in terms of just raw projection, I think it's really close. It's Elliott or Le'Veon. And we actually have Elliott higher right now. So maybe I should take Elliott. I can't believe Le'Veon's fell from his perch where it's just like not a lock that he's the number one guy. Oh, can I change to Elliott or is that
you can change to Elliott, sure.
We have him a point higher, and I mean I do like the spot a lot better for Elliott, but yeah, I'll go Elliott.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Elliott there too.
You guys are all Elliott against LaShawn.
Yeah. Although I mean the LaShawn I mean, I think that's fine too. Like if people ended up going with him in cash games and GPPs, like I don't think that would be bad. But I think I prefer Elliott in the spot at home against the Rams.
Yeah.
In the spirit of throwing out some equity, you guys just threw out some good ones. I think this is me giving up some equity, but curious your thoughts. I'll take Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. You can pick any other receiver you want, just highest scoring receiver.
So you're 2 against R1.
Yeah, but you get any receiver, whoever scores the highest.
Yeah.
I would think that would be some value, but I'm not sure. I guess you have Julio, AB, Beckham.
And Renee, just to clarify, this is DraftKings scoring, in case we didn't make that apparent.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that against you, Pete. I'll go Odell.
Okay.
You're adding your two together?
No, just highest.
Just whoever scores the most.
I'll go with OBJ. I think Antonio on the road against the Ravens is maybe just a little too much. I mean, I could see Julio. Renee, where are you on this?
I'm tempted to go Julio. I don't know. I don't trust Eli. Even if it's just to prop up for Coors Light, but
I'm tempted to go AJ Green, to be honest.
I love Odell Beckham Jr. I hate Eli Manning. It's such a push situation for me every week.
That's fair.
I'll take Hopkins.
Wow.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that too. Wow. At 64, wow, man.
And just because that's not super clear, I'll take Simeon. I'll take Simeon and Matt Ryan, and you can take any other two quarterbacks just as a 2 versus 2 as well, just to get some correlation. Just because I don't know if that's crystal clear that was me giving up a lot of equity. So I'm taking Simeon, Matt Ryan. You can take Brady and whoever else you want versus 2 versus 2, just whoever has the highest scoring quarterback.
This is for anyone or just Renee?
Anyone.
Okay.
Okay. I'll do Brady. And yeah, it's kind of hard. I don't know, Renee. What are you thinking? I guess here's a question: Is Russell Wilson in play on this or not?
That's where I was thinking.
No, well, Pete. I guess it's up to Pete. I thought you were sort of talking main slate, but I guess
So Wilson's not on the main slate for DraftKings.
Yeah, main slate. I might go Brady and Palmer. I'm sort of thinking there.
You can go any slate.
Any slate? Oh, wow. Any slate. So you're giving up Russell.
Yeah, it's more fun to go through this with all the slate, especially since this comes out early. People have the option. I definitely think people should be trying to play this Thursday through Monday slate. It's awesome.
So, okay, right, so Brady and Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I'll do Brady. I'm torn between Wilson and Rodgers.
Rodgers.
So I'll do Rodgers just to try to pile it on and get the onslaught. But yeah,
I'll take Brady on Pete, and I'll take Brady and Mariota.
Nice. Sticking in the main slate. Yeah, that is. Renee's being too nice to you, Pete.
I know I'm going to ruin it for all future guests. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Renee's being too nice.
I want to try, and I understand the dislike of Eli Manning, but I want to try to do something where I take Eli and Tyrod, and you can take 2 quarterbacks, but not like Brady and Ryan and like that tier. So I'm trying to think of like what the different price points should be for where you can take quarterbacks.
Like you want Eli? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'll take Eli and Tyrod. And you
$7K.
2 under 7K seems like I'm just asking to lose. I'm trying maybe like one between. Yeah, I guess like one under the Brady and Ryan tier. And then one under 5,900. Although I can
take Matt Ryan and Simeon again. All the leverage. I'm in the hole.
No. One underneath the Ryan tier.
Oh, underneath the Ryan tier.
Yeah, but so like
main slate only.
I haven't even looked at the salaries for the other slates, but so like not like Brady, Ryan, Rodgers, or Breeze, not like one of those guys.
And you get Eli and
Tyrod.
Watson and
Simeon. I'm going Watson, Simeon.
All right, I'll go Simeon with you. I'll stick with Prescott. I was gonna go Prescott.
Okay.
Yeah. Prescott I like quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Palmer and Simeon actually.
Yeah, I like those. I mean, I think all 3 of you will beat me, but for some reason I like the I don't know why. I want to have a little bit of fake Eli exposure here.
I hear you.
Can I take Dalvin Cook and something here? I'm trying to think of how I can what combo I can pair. How about I'll do this? I'll Dalvin. What kind of you guys want to? Is there like a fantasy points? We have him at 17. Can I go over on that?
Yeah, you want the over. I think I'll take the under on that, Pete.
Okay.
I understand.
Like a combo. Like, what can I Dalvin Cook? Like, give me the first pick, you get the second, third, and then I get Dalvin Cook on the fourth.
I mean, we can do that too, but I'm fine with us doing the line there. If you have the over on 17, I have the under.
That's just what we have as FantasyLabs projection it right now.
Yeah,
I would take the over on 17.
Okay. Y'all
bang,
both.
bang.
Y'all. Yeah.
You'll take the under, Renee?
2v2.
All right.
Okay. We haven't really talked tight ends. I don't think too much. Anyone want to throw out a tight end thing? It could be Gronk versus. I don't know how. Whatever you guys are thinking.
I said Kelsey's the top tight end of the week, so he's not main slate though. So I don't know.
How about this? We'll give you this. Well, I'll take Gronk, and you get the next pick. So you get Kelsey and whoever you want, and I'll take Gronk in the next pick. All slates.
Hurts.
Okay. I will take
Old
Daddy Witten.
I'm going to go Charles Clay, who I think is a great
Nice. If honestly, can I jump on the Renee side of that? Because if we did the same thing, it would be the exact same draft.
Yeah, that's good.
Brian, you jumping on that?
No.
You can jump on the Pete side of that too if you want.
I don't like either side.
I mean, tight
end
end
not like either side. It's not a clear cut. It's not one of his layups that he's just like, oh, I'll get on that one.
I mean, tight end this week I think is kind of gross. I mean, it doesn't. I don't think there's a lot of clear value at any spot.
Yeah.
I'll like Delaney Walker a little bit just because I like that game. I like Mariota.
Yeah, I like Delaney Walker as well. We mentioned Cameron Braid at 3.8.
What are your thoughts on Walker going against that Houston defense? I mean, they've been – I mean, outside of Gronk, they've been pretty stout for a while against tight ends going back to last season. But it's hard to know what that's a function of.
Is not – I don't think it's the strongest DVP arguments because so many teams don't have a quality tight end, but it still gets factored in,
Right.
You got Gresham and one of the Sellecks, and if you're facing somebody like that, more often your numbers can end up looking better than they really are. So I don't have too much stock in that.
Right.
Even if you adjust for salary, it's still a little bit noisy. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Has anyone figured out what's going on with the Chargers? Hunter Henry, 0 targets, 7 targets in week 2, 0 targets in week 3. That's just a mess.
And he caught all 7.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's talented, right? He's good.
He's good.
They gave Gates that one red zone target strictly to get him a touchdown, to get him the record. But he should be the guy going forward, I would think. But it's kind of weird what they've been doing with him.
Yeah, really weird. Okay. Keep on throwing some stuff out. We can go to defenses. We can do whatever.
Brian, why don't you throw something out there, bud?
I throw out LaShawn McCoy. Come on, guys.
That's one.
Yeah, you're on the board.
You're on the board.
On the board. All right. I'll keep on. If you guys have anything else, in the meantime, I'll come up with something when you guys do that.
Okay, I'm interested in thoughts on Lamar Miller, just because he's super cheap, but he's still getting decent volume each week. He's just not getting red zone work. But in all fairness, really no one in that offense, no running back has gotten any carries inside the 10 yet. So it's hard to know exactly how they will divide those carries whenever they come about. But at home. I mean, it's not a horrible spot. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what we even think a line should be, but I'm interested in Lamar Miller in part just because he's so cheap.
You want to use the projection?
Yeah. What's his projection right now?
12.5. I would take the under on that if you want the over. I mean, like, yeah, you're saying that you don't know how like the red zone rushing is going to break down. Like, I think it might be Deshaun.
Yeah. I tell you what, if you're willing to bump that line down to 11.5, then I will take the over.
Let's just split it 12.
Okay, I'll take over 12. Pete, Renee, either one of you want to sign on that?
No opinion, really.
Yeah.
No, I'm not in a good position because I was on him last week.
What about?
She understands her biases. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What about?
Ready to roster Foreman. All the anger.
What about some guys in the wide receiver position that'll be interesting? One thing I really wish I would be so high if we could play Tyler Lockett on the main slate. I really like him going forward. Yeah, I'll do Lockett for someone if you guys want to, or just the projection.
What's the projection?
And is it with or without Baldwin playing?
Well, that's the beauty of doing these things on Tuesdays. We just have no idea.
Hey,
We
Pete,
can put that in there, I guess, but
Pete, I've got a good prop for you, Pete.
Okay.
I'll take the Minnesota wide receivers versus your Denver wide receivers.
Okay, sure, done.
So Diggs and Thielen versus Demaryius and
I can't find Lockett there. I think I just saw him. We have him at 9.2 points. I'll go over 10.
I'll take the under.
Okay. All right. Feel good about that one.
Let's go back to the Minnesota versus Denver wide receiver prop bet. Bryan, what is your thought process on the Minnesota receivers there? They're at home going against Detroit. We don't know yet what's going on with Keenum and Bradford.
We also didn't clarify. Is that total points? Like, do your two guys versus the two guys, or just like the highest scoring receiver versus the highest scoring Denver receiver?
I was just going highest, but I think
okay, let's do highest. That's easier.
I think
the
other
highest is fine.
Yeah,
that's fine with me too.
So, Bryan, what are your thoughts there? What are your thoughts there on the Minnesota wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought is that even with Keenum, like it sort of didn't matter. I'm sort of buying high on the talent of Thielen and especially Diggs going against this Detroit defense and secondary that has been like pretty solid lately, but I'm sort of banking on some of their other splits. So, yeah, like probably giving up a little equity there, but like Pete's buying high on the talent of Cooper. Not saying that these guys are in the same ballpark, but I think Thielen and Diggs are just really talented guys.
Everyone's saying Diggs over Cooper in that same draft class, and I mean Diggs has been incredible.
Long term, I don't think I would do that, Pete.
On that prop bet,
talented. I mean, Diggs is the number one receiver in high school in his class. So
on that prop bet, I'll take the Pete side of it, the Denver wide receivers.
Yeah, that's probably the smart pick, to be honest.
Oh, okay. What's our projection on JJ Nelson? Because I'm gonna find redemption this week.
All right, I'll give you the under whatever it is.
I think the last 2 weeks the line has been the same. I was just going back and looking at it, 12.5 points. So we'll work from there. I guess we'll bump it down after last week. But
12.5 is what it is right now for JJ Nelson.
It's got to be lower than that.
No, that's what it was last week. That was or the last 2 weeks. The prop that the line that we bet on was 12.5.
Yeah. So
it's down around 9 right now. So we could do something around that. We could do 10.
9. We'll do 9.
9, that's fine. Give it to him.
I'll take the over. I'm shooting myself on but I'll take the over. Renee,
I'll give you the under just to give you action, bud.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. Renee, are you on either side of that?
I'm honestly on the over. Man, all right. So Renee, 2 versus 2. I like it.
Renee, I'm curious.
Love it.
What, you don't love it?
No.
You're just doing it?
It's one of those fluky situations. Like,
yeah, it's tough. I mean, going against San Francisco is sort of like that's the wild card, right? What were you gonna say, Freedman?
No, just like to know what people are thinking with the JJ Nelson opinion. Let's
close it out with defense, unless you have some other ones you really want to get.
Yeah, let's do defense.
I'll take Seattle, and you can take. How about this? I'll take Seattle, and I'll give you 3 picks, and then I get a second pick, and whoever has the highest scoring defense wins. So I go Seattle, then you get 3 picks in a row, all defenses, all slates. Then I get the final pick, whoever has the highest scoring defense.
Okay.
That has to be good. I mean, that's at least fair.
Yeah.
I'll go Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Denver.
Okay. Like those picks. Freedman, I know you got to get in, and we're going to force Bryan to do this one.
Yeah.
I'm getting in. Don't you worry, Pete.
All right. So Renee went. She went Denver, Pittsburgh, and Jacksonville, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like those. And it's highest, right? We're going for highest.
Yeah, whoever had the highest score.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go with Packers, Jaguars, and Steelers.
Okay.
I'm going Packers as well. I'm going Jacksonville, and I'm going Bengals.
Okay. So versus Renee, I'm taking the Packers, and versus Bryan and Matt, I'm taking the Broncos.
Nice. That's good. I think that's good.
That was a good prop.
That was a good prop. Yeah. Any last ones? I guess we're sort of winding down here.
Should we could do a kicker prop. I'm basically joking on the kicker props.
You're only half joking.
Let's not do a kicker prop. I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready. Oh, okay. I'll take well, actually, I'm fine. We can do something similar to what Pete just suggested. So I'll take Gostkowski. You can take 2 kickers, and then I'll take a 4th kicker if anyone wants to do that.
Not really looking very solid on my kickers at this point.
Yeah, if you had asked me on Thursday, Matt, I would Wednesday's my kicker day.
Yeah, Wednesdays when you grind your kicker research.
Yeah. So okay. Tuesday nights I'm just woefully unprepared.
Yeah.
I'll take Bryan and Prater.
Oh, I like that. Okay, I will run it back with Santos.
Like it.
Wow, ending with some kicker props. What a week.
We are so degenerate.
We really are. Hey, I was thinking about this earlier just before we end. Do you guys have any thoughts on because I think that we might be like a week away from seeing another coach fired, maybe first head coach fired. Do you guys have any thoughts about that prop market?
That's interesting. Okay, let's set an over-under for like the week. Well, no, because that's like multiple show thing. That's kind of further out. So what are you thinking? Like, I don't think a coach is going to be fired after week 4.
After week 4?
Like after this week, I don't think a coach is going to be fired. I don't know if a coach will even be fired after week 5. I think it's further out. Like, who is it that you think is vulnerable enough to be fired within a couple of weeks?
Probably McAdoo.
Interesting.
I think Pagano might be like I don't like Pagano. I don't know because I don't know like whether they want to win. You know, I think McAdoo is like an interesting if you want to bet against the Giants and then also parlay that with McAdoo getting fired. That's sort of interesting because I think if they lose, they'll be 0-4.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really.
I think
tough.
With McAdoo, it would be a situation where they make another move first, like someone else takes play calling duties, and he stays on as head coach, and then everything still crumbles to the ground, and then he's fired like in week 13 or 14. I think that might be the likelier scenario, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know as far as like win a week, like what sort of prop bet we should do as far as like the week goes. I think that we're just getting close to seeing a coach fired, so I've been sort of looking at those odds. I was looking at earlier that someone actually moved to being a favorite on the markets, which was sort of crazy. I think it might have been
Pagano. Yeah, I mean, although I think he bought himself some time with the victory in week 3.
Yeah, I thought so too. And again, like I'm not really sure whether they want to win.
Yeah. Well, if you're up for it, I will book you a multi-week bet where I will say no head coach is fired before week 6.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
6.
I'll take the no too. I'll take the no as well.
Okay. Yeah. Just for fun. Yeah, I'll take you up.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I say no, will you hold all the future guests?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Whatever it happens, that person gets the penalty on it if they lose, not you.
Nice.
It doesn't count against your record. And if you want to throw out any prop bets for other people right now as well, too, we'll take them. Yeah, really. All right, we're going to end it there. Thanks, Renee, for coming on. You've been a guest a bunch of times. You were, I think, one of like our first guests ever on like the FantasyLabs podcast, like 2 or 3 years ago. So it's been great having you on over the years.
It's always good to be back.
Cool. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Good luck in week 4, and we'll talk to you guys next week.